Our final game in this chapter will be a high-level catastrophe, miniature, which did happen to one of the world's best players. Playing white was Peter Svidler, playing black was Shakhriyar Mamedyarov. It is a sort of recent game, was played 2018, Tata Steel Super Tournament in Vaikanze. Let's see this game. It started as a peaceful Ragozin. c4, knight f6, knight f3, e6, knight c3, d5, d4, bishop b4. Well, here Peter Svidler took a little bit unusual decision to develop his c1 bishop to f4. It is not played so much. Mostly this bishop goes either to g5, or white plays move queen a4 check, let's say knight queen a4 check, let's say knight c6, and move like, let's say, e3, and these bishops stay where he is. So cd5, ed5, bishop f4. Little bit unusual. Knight e4, since bishop is not pinned, Mamedyarov would like to jump. Okay, queen a4, forcing knight to c6 in front of his pawn. Knight c6, rook c1. Castles. Here we have already actually sort of a critical situation. Actually, white's situation, believe it or not, is already critical here. As early as move 8. This position was later on not repeated after these catastrophes. White needs to develop. It is no-brainer that this bishop needs to develop in order to be able to castle. There are two sensible moves, e3 or g3. Actually, both moves run into similar set of problems. If, let's say, a3, which was played in one game, in order to force the decision with the bishop. Happens takes, and now black has a very dangerous plan, g5. Bishop e3, f5, g3, f4. Takes, bishop d2, king h8. Black's king is very safe on h8, but white is having problems as to what to do with his king. In the game happened rook to g1, knight d2, king d2, bishop f5, bishop g2, queen d6. Black's king is much safer than his white colleague. Bishop is cutting a king's retreat. Rook will come to e-file. e2 is weak. White could not solve his problems, and black won the game convincingly. Peter Svidler decided to play move here g3. And here what to play with the black? Shakhriyar Mamedyarov played a very strong move g5. Pay attention that very often in a similar kind of positions g5 is moved to consider. g5, bishop e3. Well, if bishop d2, let's say rook e8 looks very unpleasant, because on a3 there is bishop g4. And if, let's say, bishop a3, bishop g4, you now don't have the time to take a bishop because I want to take, and file will open. If you take, you cannot take because I take, and file cannot open because knight will deliver a devastating check and collect the queen. And if move like bishop g2, let's say g4, knight e5, rook takes, is a very strong move. Knight takes, rook e4. Also d takes e4 is working. Bishop takes, queen takes. Everything is pinned. But let's say rook e4. Bishop takes, only move because, okay, if you take, I will simply take and grab a bishop. So bishop takes and rook d4. This rook looks a bit funny. but there is no really compensation for a pawn. And this is also now hanging. There are a lot of troubles here. Peter played move bishop, and also very difficult for white. You have to understand this is a practical game. It is not computer playing. And here to decide what to do is not easy. So bishop e3 is more logical because you are running away from knight takes d2. f5, the most straightforward. Probably the strongest was bishop c3, bc3, f5. With a similar type of play like in this game which I did show after a3, right? Where we got, for example, this kind of position. Now after bishop c3, bc3, f5, bishop g2, we can get something similar. f4, takes, bishop d2, king h8. And black is better, because black king is actually safer, and black took space. And black has very good attacking potential. f5 has actually one drawback, and it gave Swidler possibility to get back into game. Now actually move bishop g2 is strong. Because if you play move rook to e8, if you play move rook e8 just to try to copy bishop d2, rook e8, now pawn, in first instance pawn was on f7. Here pawn is on f5, and it brings problem for black, because after bishop g2, now move g4 is less great, because after knight takes knight e5, you cannot rook e5 idea do, because d5, knight d2, something which would have worked perfect with the pawn on f7, because with the pawn on f7, it works perfectly. Like, for example, when we had this line, you cannot take, obviously, because I will take, and d4, and it's a bad news, losing a knight. But when we have this kind of a situation, I cannot do this, because if knight takes, there is a Zwischenzug, bishop takes d5. And it's a bad news. King must move, bishop takes c6, and goodbye. So bishop d2 was keeping actually Peter in the game. Probably the strongest for white is to play, for black is to play a5, a3, bishop c3. Now bc3 is not good because f4, and then again black is better, but bishop c3. f4, okay, black has some initiative, but white has sort of a game. White is in a game. Black is probably a bit better, but certainly possible to play for white, playable. In the game happened on f5, bishop g2, and white will quickly get into problems impossible to solve. f4, g takes f4, normal decision because it is easy to understand Swidler not being in a mood to play bishop d2 and to allow bishop c3, g4. Nobody wants to allow this. Knight e5, f3. This is tremendously dangerous and probably impossible to solve. Takes, ef3, gf3. Now knight f3 runs into bishop g4. This is bad news because knight and pawn are hanging. Move bishop f3, not really helping because come a powerful rook f3. Knight f3 and queen f8 and game over. Queen f6 is also winning, but probably less convincing because let's say knight e5, queen check, king d1, you need to play move here, queen g2, and it's winning. Knight e5 is not good because of queen e8 check. That's why queen f8 is more precise, because now if knight e5 you simply take. And pawn cannot take because there is going to be mate in 2. So easy to understand Swidler not being in a mood to play bishop d2 and to allow this taking on c3 and g4 and f3. Very easy to understand. Because also if you take and ignore with bishop f1, simple move like bishop f5, how does this king ever get out? So just a winning position. Peter he took, And now is important moment, because if pawn takes, then bishop d2, bishop c3, bishop c3 again. Survival chances. King h8, black is better, but survival chances. White is in a much better shape if black is forced to take back on c3 with a pawn, because then there will be also more problem for his king. And also with the bishop on c3, you have possibilities of a jump are better. So here Mamedyarov took first bishop c3, bc3, gf4. Now bishop d2 is forced, king h8. There are now no really good moves. If c4, to try to open things up, let's say bishop e6, nothing opens. If move like h4, let's say bishop g4 is terrible news. And if c4, for example, I can even take bishop f3, knight e4. Simply a pawn up for nothing. Let's say c takes, knight f3, gf3, queen d5 check. Black is a full pawn up and a better position. If h3, just here, if h3, maybe just rook g8. Terrible situation for white. And normally when somebody is having terrible situation, then it's easy to collapse in a matter of few moves, but probably position cannot be saved anyway. The Svidler played move queen b3. Now Mamedyarov improved his knight, of course, knight a5, queen c2, knight c4, rook d1. What to do? Rook g8. Knight e5, hoping to use the tactics to trade a few pieces in order to save the game, because he threatens knight f7, knight e5, bishop e4, hoping to save the game. But what is here a problem? What is sort of a blockbuster which basically ends the game in one move? Mate in 1, powerful threat, queen g5, actually mate in 2, queen g1, rook g1, rook g1. And here there are no moves, basically. White is going to end being a piece down and still being under attack. Bishop f4, only way to prevent mate. Queen f4, bishop d5, bishop f5. Black is a piece up with mating attack running, so Svidler, he resigned. In this game, what is interesting is I was actually kind of, by looking at this, it's incredible. Once a white was hit with the move g5, and pay attention, in such a position, you also see it in some Catalans, that g5 in such a situation can be very powerful, disrupting his bishop from f4. So here, after a move like g5, how quickly and how terribly situation went for white. So this is the last game in this chapter, and I hope that this selection of those games will give you some kind of, will give you an inspiration to use similar kind of plans in your own games.